I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you are listening to For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you and your wealth and your health and your happiness, and the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and family and of everybody, because ecology is the one science that embraces everybody, because we're all part of the Earth's ecology. You know, whether we like it or not, whether we think we can sort of isolate ourselves in these human-made structures most of us are sitting in right now, you're still part of the ecology of the planet. There's literally no way to escape it as long as you're on the planet. I suppose if you went off to Mars or someplace, you'd be free of Earth's ecology, but then you'd be stuck in Mars ecology, because there's the ecological sciences are everywhere, and it's best to just learn them and work with them than fight against them. And so we are not fighting against ecology. We're embracing ecology on this show, and in fact, we have a great show coming up for you. I managed to land an interview with a woman named Michaela King, and she is the author of a study that made headlines around the world last week. She studies glaciers, and she studies the glaciers on Greenland specifically, and she did a study talking about how the glacial melt has increased in Greenland. And so we'll be hearing the details of that interview. That's at 8:15. And then we're going to have hear from our wonderful sponsors. And after that, of course, we have our Eco News segment. And we have a guest calling in for the Eco News. Pat Marida, who's been a guest on the show before, is going to give us an update about what's happening down there in Columbus with HB6, because there's new developments. And it's one of the things when we talk about affecting your pocketbook, this one affects your pocketbook directly. Because if HB6 goes into effect, you are going to get charged personally to keep nuke plants and coal plants running in Ohio and Indiana. So that's a big one. And our co-host, Rebecca Wood, will be joining us also. She has some news about Slovenia, of all places. I actually don't know what the story's about, but we'll find out. Then we'll have some more Eco News and the letter from the future. And as usual, we would love to have, in addition to all that content that we're bringing you, we'd love to hear from you. So call anytime in the show, 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. This is a call-in show, and this is the best show in Ohio, but it gets better every time you call. So please jump in on any environmental topic. It doesn't have to be something you heard on the show. Anything you'd like to hear. Any questions you have about environment or ecology, we'd be happy to field them. So this past week was a big one for my wife and myself. It was our 36th wedding anniversary, of all things. And so we decided to do something that we used to do back pre-children, and that is go for a hot air balloon ride. We actually used to be volunteers on the crew for hot air balloons, the people that help inflate the balloon and put it up and take it down and chase it around as it's floating all over the place. We did that back before children. So now that our kids are all gone and moved off to Colorado, actually, we decided to go back and do a balloon ride, and it was wonderful. It was great. You just get up there. There's really nothing like it because when the burner's going, the sound is like just this overwhelming roaring noise. But when the burner's off, it's complete silence, and you can be 1,500 feet up in the air, but you can hear people talking down on the ground because it's so quiet up there and beautiful. And we saw you could see the horizon, and we floated out over this lake, Candlewood Lake it was called, and we were up for about an hour. It was great. But of course, me being me, I was looking, and hot air balloons right now, most of them are powered by propane, which is of course a fossil fuel. And so I was talking with the pilot, and there's other ways to do it. Some balloonists use hydrogen gas. And so if you generate the hydrogen with solar power, then it's not putting any carbon in the air. And actually in a hydrogen balloon, you can stay up for hours and hours. The hot air balloons can stay up for a little while till they run out of propane, then they have to come down. But a hydrogen balloon could stay up theoretically indefinitely. And then we also were talking about there's this company that claims they've developed a rigid balloon that you can actually pump the air out of the envelope and so create a vacuum on the inside. And that vacuum causes the whole structure to be less dense, and so it will float. So it's a rigid airship that instead of having a gas, either hot air or hydrogen or helium, it's actually got a vacuum, and that is enough to lift it up off the ground and make it fly. It's just a reminder that we can still have all the fun stuff in the green future. We can still have ballooning, and we can still have cars, and we can still have whatever turns you on. There's a way to do it that doesn't destroy the environment. You just have to search for it, and you have to find it. And it's more work, and sometimes, the transition has to be done carefully. As last week we had on the show the deputy ambassador from Germany, and he was describing how they have a multi-decade process of switching to carbon-free, nuclear-free energy, but they are doing it, and that's one of the main points we like to make over and over on For a Green Future, is that the green future is a comfortable future. The green future is one that we actually get to still enjoy all the material benefits we have. In fact, we get to enjoy more of them because the air will be cleaner, we will be healthier, there'll be, the water will be cleaner, it'll just be better. So let's get there. That's my pitch for the day. Let's get to that green future as fast as we can. And I also wanted to talk a little bit. We're getting into fall now, and the birds are starting to migrate. But a few weeks ago, I saw a bird that I had never seen before. I never recognized. It was a red bird. Wasn't a cardinal. Wasn't a scarlet tanager. I got home and looked it up. And this was a bird on the Slippery Elm Trail. And it turned out that it's something called a summer tanager, which I'd never seen one before. And I told a birder friend of mine, and he was like, "Where did you see that?" Yeah, and wanted to know exactly where I saw it, because apparently this is a bird that a lot of birders are eager to find and check off on their list. In a normal situation, in a normal environment, if we were living in normal times, birds like that wouldn't be so incredibly rare that people literally drive hundreds of miles for a chance to see one. We are in the fall migration right now, and I heard a huge, quote-unquote, huge flock of maybe 60 or 70 geese this morning flying around. They're trying to figure out, who's going to be in the lead when we migrate and how do you do it and so forth. But I think that the thing is to remember is that in a normal time, this is not something that would be unusual. There should be, right now, between mid-August and mid-October, that's the peak migration time. We should have hundreds and thousands of birds flying around. The skies literally should be darkening with them, and that is what we should call normal. That is how things are supposed to be. And, we need to get back to that. And we can. Nature's proven over and over again that if we help it, it will get back to normal. It will recover. Anyway, speaking of things that are normal and not normal, what's going on Greenland with the ice sheet right now is not normal. And I managed to land an interview with Michaela King. Russell, do we have that interview ready to go? All right. Well, let's go ahead and play it. Welcome, this is Michaela King to For a Green Future. I was just wondering could you start by giving us your name and your position at OSU?
All right. Hi. Yeah. Thank you for having me. My name is Michaela King, and I'm a researcher at what's called the Bird, Polar, and Climate Research Center, and that's a research facility at Ohio State University.
And could you give us a quick overview of that study that you published in Nature Communications, Earth, and Environment that's gotten so much attention?
Yeah, absolutely. So for this study, we use satellite data, so essentially pictures and information taken from satellites from space, and we use satellite data to monitor over 3 decades of change that we observed at Greenland outlet glaciers. And so when I say an outlet glacier, you can essentially think of a frozen river of ice where the ice sheet builds up so thick in the middle that it actually kind of flows out under its own weight. So I like to think of almost pouring pancake batter where you only can get so thick in the middle where it actually flows outward. And so we're really focused on these glaciers that surround the edge of the ice sheet, which drain the thick interior ice into the ocean where the ice breaks off in these big icebergs. And so by studying over 3 decades of change at these large outlet glaciers, we observed that these glaciers have largely retreated since the 1980s. And so retreat means that the actual front of the glacier where it meets the ocean has moved back through time. So the glacier itself is getting shorter because the front's breaking off faster than it's being replenished. And because of this widespread retreat, this actually allowed the ice from the thick interiors of the ice sheet to kind of flow faster. So there's more ice being drained through these outlet glaciers than before. So this is an increase that we saw. It was relatively steady until about 2000, the year 2000. Then we saw a big increase in the matter of about 5 to 6 years. And now we're draining much more ice through these glaciers than we were previously. Now, this is important because prior to 2000, the amount of ice that we were draining through these glaciers was roughly balanced by the total snow that we would gain every year through snowfall on the ice sheet. So the ice sheet was more or less in balance, where you're losing ice at the edge, but it's being gained back in the middle. However, after this big increase in the volume of ice these glaciers are draining, we are now consistently losing more ice at the edges than we gain through snowfall accumulation. And so because of this, we are persistently losing mass every year. So the ice sheet is shrinking because we're losing more ice than we are gaining.
I see. Now, some in the media have characterized your study as sort of showing that we've passed a point of no return with the Greenland ice sheet, that now all the continent's glaciers are doomed to melt and flow into the ocean, raising the sea levels. Do you agree with that characterization?
I don't like the doom and gloom kind of narrative that has sort of popped up with this story. I mean, it certainly isn't good news for the ice sheet. I mean, we expect that every year that recently and going forward in the next few decades, that we'll consistently see the ice sheet losing mass, because we've kind of shifted the ice sheet to this new dynamic state where we're consistently losing more ice at the edge than we're gaining. Now, I don't necessarily think that we should say that means the ice sheet is doomed or too far gone without repair, and we should just throw our hands up and not do anything, because although we expect the ice sheet to continue to lose mass, we can, of course, control the rate that mass and the rate that that ice is lost. So if we were to do nothing regarding climate change, of course we would lose that ice much faster than if we would try to, mitigate current rates of warming. Lower rates of change are much more desirable as far as sea level rise and mitigating, coastal communities and how they're adapting to that than just letting the ice sheet completely disintegrate. So I wouldn't say it's doomed, but it does help us understand, what's the current rate of change we're seeing and what do we expect that to look like in the future, and help us better prepare for sea level rise scenarios.
Okay. Yeah, well, in here on For a Green Future, we are all about having people do that mitigation. We're trying to get people to cut down on their carbon as much as possible. Have you actually visited the Greenland ice sheet, and could you give our listeners some idea what it's like to stand on a glacier?
Yeah, and I have been to Greenland twice, and I want to just go back to your point real quick and say that, that was one thing that was kind of discouraging about some of the more doomsday headlines, because you don't want people to think there's nothing you can do. We can certainly control the rate, or do our best to control the rate of change. So it's certainly not, the message it's trying to send is not to just give up, of course. Like, we can very much still control how fast sea levels rise. But going back to the question about the Greenland ice sheet, yes, I visited twice during my PhD work. It's such an amazing place. I guess one of the most impressive things to me was just the sheer scale of these features. I mean, these glaciers are miles across, and the size of these icebergs that are capping or breaking off into the ocean are the size of small towns or skyscrapers. You really just get totally engulfed with the scale of these features. And we did a lot of our work further inland on the ice sheet, so moving away from the coast, going towards the center, where a lot of the ice is really flat. So you're standing on a flat, really pristine surface where you're standing on nearly 2 miles thick of ice. So it's almost like being on a mountain, but you don't realize it because it looks like flat ice in all directions. But it's a very serene experience. It's a very special place.
Sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
Your study, we're not being doom and gloom here, but your study is suggesting that the rate of glacial melt is increasing every year by something like 50 gigatons. Could you give us some idea of what that scale is, some sort of image we can wrap our heads around to understand what that means?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so our study showed that the total volume of ice being drained from these glaciers was relatively steady until 2000, and then it increased by about 60 gigatons. And so we've kind of made this staircase or a step stair, trying to think of a way to describe it, where we're steady and we jumped up, and now we're kind of at this new elevated rate where we're losing close to 500 gigatons of ice per year. So the total amount of volume being drained from these glaciers is about 500 gigatons a year, and that is a little bit more than what would take to fill Lake Erie. So I also was doing a couple little napkin calculations, or you can think of it about enough ice to cover all of Ohio with about a 12-foot sheet of ice.
Wow.
So, but yeah, it's hard to put, these mental images to what, a gigaton. A gigaton is basically 1 billion metric tons, so 500 billion metric tons. But so think of it like the amount of ice needed to fill Lake Erie.
Wow. Okay.
Or make a really big skating ring over Ohio, or something like that. Okay,
so just to clarify things for me a little bit, it accelerated by the 50 gigatons, but now it's steady at that rate, or is it continuing to accelerate by that 50 every year now?
No, so it's not every year it's increasing by 50. It was stable at about 440 gigatons, and then we jumped up by about 60 gigatons, and now we're at this new rate where every year it's about 500 gigatons of loss. So it's just an increase of about 50 to 60 gigatons. It's not that every year we are adding an additional 50 gigatons.
Okay, good, because that I actually misunderstood.
Yeah, oh man, if it was the latter, that would definitely be a cause of alarm.
Yeah, I was thinking we were in maybe a positive feedback loop there, but it sounds like not really.
Yeah, there's a lot of different processes that kind of work together that are complicated. In some ways, it is a positive feedback loop, because as these glaciers drain more ice, they're actually drawing down the entire surface of the ice sheet. So think of a bucket or a pail of water that has a hole in it. As there's more water leaving through this hole, it's bringing down the whole water level in the bucket. So as we're draining more ice through the edges, we're kind of bringing the surface of the ice sheet lower, where at lower elevations, it's actually warmer. The temperatures are warmer. Like if you've ever gone a hike up a mountain, you notice it gets colder as you go up higher. And so as we're drawing down the surface of the ice sheet, it makes it easier for that surface to melt because now we're at lower elevations. So that's one example of a positive feedback loop, but not to the degree where, you're increasing 50 gigatons every year. But it's still something to, keep our eye on, and glaciologists have been monitoring how surface melt and glacier changes are kind of working together.
Right. Okay. What made you decide to study glaciers?
I started just as a little kid and everything. I loved weather. So I love kind of being a little storm chaser as much as you could be just in your own backyard, I guess. But, and so I was always really interested in weather. But then as I got taking college courses, this would have been around like 2010, 2012, we started learning more about climate change, like how weather and climate are different and what we're seeing change with the climate now. And I was really interested in that. I saw that as, a really pertinent issue for my generation. And so I started to instead want to study climate change, kind of shifting from day-to-day weather to long-term trends, looking at climate. And glaciers have just, other than just how beautiful they are, ice is such an easy thing to point to and see the effects of climate change because they change so quickly. They're impacted so profoundly by climate change. And so the polar regions were the area that I really wanted to focus on, and how the world's ice is changing as we continue to warm our planet.
So could I ask what part of the country you did grow up in when you were chasing storms?
I'm from Northeast Ohio. So I'm Ohioan through and through.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you on For a Green Future. And
thank you.
So as an Ohioan, why do you think should our listeners in Ohio care about, the glaciers in Greenland? They know that's so far away. And...
Yeah. And, I like to say what happens in the polar regions doesn't stay in the polar regions. Of course, we're talking sea level rise, which even us in Ohio, it's like you say sea level rise, but that we're a little protected from a lot of these natural disasters. We don't have hurricanes or earthquakes or widespread forest fires so much in Ohio, but we don't live in a bubble, right? So as coastal communities struggle with mitigating the effects of climate change and sea level rise in the future, this is of course going to trickle down and affect us in Ohio as well. And even more than the tangible effects, I think we should care about Greenland because the fact that such a ancient, huge ice sheet is changing so rapidly now should really underline just the profound impact that we are having on our climate. It's sort of like an example of how we and our effect on the environment can be, what that looks like. And so there's other ways climate change can affect us here in Ohio when it comes to crops and droughts and shortages and things like that. So use that as an example of what we can do to the climate and why we should try to reduce our impact as much as possible.
Well, let me ask this question. What was the most intense experience you had on the glacier in Greenland?
The most intense experience. Well, let's see. So I went in 2018 and 2019 in May of both years. And 2018 was like a pretty normal summer as far as temperatures and melt. But the following year, almost an exact year later, same time of year, 2019 was a really big ice loss year, and there was lots of surface melting, really warm temperatures. And so being in the same locations 1 year apart and seeing how drastically different the landscape was, we go from somewhere where it was completely frozen to the following year there's those bright blue melt ponds forming and waterfalls cascading off the edges of the ice sheet. That was really dramatic just to see in 1 year the total change and how quickly we can lose ice from the ice sheet. So that was something that was pretty incredible.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Michaela. That was a pretty intense interview, and just picture that the entire state of Ohio covered 12 feet deep in ice. That is how much ice the Greenland ice sheet's losing each year, and that kind of boggled my mind. So, yeah, what did you think? Give us a call at 866-240-1065, and we'll talk about it. One thing that I know that I don't have to think about that I just love is our advertisers. And here on For a Green Future, we are brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's a bunch of ways you can find out what's going on in the parks. One is to go to their website, which is simply wcparks.org. Another is to download their app from the App Store. That's just search for WC Parks. It's a free app, and you can get in there. And if I had my wits about me, I would have taken a picture of that scarlet tanager or summer tanager and gotten it up on the WC Parks website or app. Also, you can call them at 419-353-1897, and they have a Facebook page. So that's Wood County Park District. We're grateful to have them as a sponsor, and we're also grateful to our patrons. These are people who've gone to patreon.com and searched for a Green Future, and then they just signed up for a small, painless monthly donation, which is painless for them but causes us great joy because we really need that kind of support. We've started doing something new for our patrons. If you sign up as a patron, then every week you'll get an email that has the links to the podcast and the YouTube video. And that's something that, that way you can be sure never to miss another fun-filled, fact-filled, exciting episode of For a Green Future. So please consider becoming a patron. All right, Russell, we have some people calling in. Have we got Pat Marida on the line? So Pat, hi. We'll start with you. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Yes. Oh, and how are you doing, Rebecca?
I'm okay too.
Okay, great. Okay, Pat. Well, we asked you to come on today to just give us a little bit of an update of what's happening with that horrible House Bill 6 and the effort to repeal it. So, can you tell us what's happening down there in Columbus?
Yeah, well, to remind your listeners of the background, House Bill 6 gave First Energy $1.3 billion to subsidize 2 nuclear plants on Lake Erie and 2 coal plants on the Ohio River. And we remember all the dirty tricks that were used to pass the bill, from the dark money way back in the 2018 Republican primaries to the payoff to signature gatherers to not collect signatures on a referendum that would have overturned the bill. Now, so 2 months ago, most people have heard the revelations of racketeering criminality that resulted in the arrest of Ohio House Speaker Larry Householder and 4 others. And the dark money turned out to be $61 million in bribes paid for entirely by what they call Company A, which everyone knows is First Energy. And then it has a new limited liability corporation, Energy Harbor, that came out of bankruptcy owning Davis Bessie and Perry Nukes on Lake Erie. So what we're saying is that we, citizens and ratepayers, we're going to need to push really hard to get House Bill 6 repealed, because many legislators have been the beneficiaries of the illegal householder fund and of First Energy over the years. And so they want to posture repeal, but they talk about, replacing it, which is in its own way the opposite of repeal. And so there's one major point I really want to make about this, that legislators, they want to avoid the issue of criminality by talking about how great House Bill 6 is and about all the, what we say are not the merits, the non-existent, but they want to talk about the merits of nuclear power. But we want to remind them that debating the bill is really skirting the issue. But the real issue is giving money to First Energy is to reward criminal behavior. It's,
right.
As the U.S. Attorney has said, the largest bribery and money laundering scheme ever perpetrated against the people of Ohio. So that's the main point we want to keep honing in on, keep hammering in.
Yeah, the whole repeal and replace, the whole replace idea means, yes, we caught the crook, yeah, but you can keep the loot. you can still reap all the benefits of having broken the law. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And now, so it looks like the House is doing this maneuver that it's going to slow things up quite a bit. I mean, the repeal coalition is pushing to get the repeal before the fall election, but now the new leader of the House, Cupp, I think is his name, has done something new. Could you tell us about that?
So, well, the Democrats in the House, they wanted to actually bring the bill forward, but Cupp
and just
said,
straight repeal.
Oh, they were just posture. You're just yes, bring the repeal bill forward. But Robert Cupp, who's the new Speaker of the House, he doesn't seem like he really wants to repeal it. So he said they're just posturing. But I think one possibly good thing that has happened in the House is that they have formed a new committee. It won't be going to the old Energy and Natural Resources Committee. There's a new committee forming that will deal with it.
If they take too long, if they wait weeks and months and wait till after the election, then all the pressure will be off, and So I think that I'm afraid that the new committee might just be a stalling tactic.
Oh yeah, you're right, in that they want to stall because then they're hoping that the issue will die down and get swept under the rug.
Right. Well, we can't let that happen. Not if we want to preserve our democracy here in Ohio, and democracy, I think, is a good thing. I'm a great believer in it. Okay, I got to tell you, Pat, that when I was one of the people gathering petitions to overturn House Bill 6 last summer and fall, and one of the things they spent that $60 million on was hiring these blockers, who were people that just came and harassed and assaulted the petition gatherers. They were both harassing and assaulting them and offering them bribes to stop gathering petitions. It was a very effective combination, but petition gathering is the fundamental building block of democracy. Just going out and getting signatures, getting permission from your fellow citizens to do something, that, and talking to them face to face, that is democracy. And so these people literally were attacking democracy while they were attacking us, the petition gatherers. So it needs to be repealed. We don't need a lot of debate or decision or detail or nuance or replacement of all things. But yeah, okay. So you were going to say something, Pat? Go ahead.
Oh well, I listened to the Senate hearings, which lasted about a half an hour, and they brought forth false statistics, saying that the repeal will cost $2.3 billion, or maybe it'll cost ratepayers $3.8 billion. And we say, undercutting the free market price of electricity with a $1.3 billion subsidy to keep this an expensive and inefficient utility afloat, how can that save money? Just in the Dispatch just a couple of days ago, a man who represents a pro-nuclear think tank, he reported in the Columbus Dispatch the same thing that the Sierra Club has been reporting, that utilities reported savings of like $2.60 for every dollar invested in efficiency, for an average monthly savings of $7.71 per customer, and has saved over $7 billion since 2009. And this is the bill that House Bill 6 overturned, that savings. And not only that, but when efficiency reduces demand, then that puts a downward pressure on electric rates. So in the article that was in the Dispatch, Tolbert, the author, showed that House Bill 6 results in a rate hike of $7.01 per month. So
they're sticking us with the charge, but what they're using that money with the charge for, well, is going to actually cost us another $7 on top of that every month. And also a third way that House Bill 6 raises our rates is it prevents the development of wind and solar in Ohio. And wind and solar are cheaper forms of power than coal or nuclear. And so they're forcing us to continue to buy the expensive electricity generation forms and stay away from the cheap forms of electricity. So it's just terrible every single way you look at it. So, all right. Well, thank you very much for the update, Pat. We got to move on.
Oh, thank you for having
here.
me on, and thank you for so much for your wonderful show.
Well, I love doing it. We both love doing it, don't we, Rebecca?
You bet.
That was a long pause, Rebecca. We may have to talk after the show, but
I did want to say one thing for people to please, do an internet search and find the Ohio legislature, and when you get to that into their website, you can find your senator and representative using your address, and call them and email them and mention that you live in their district and say no. We want to. No House Bill 6, repeal House Bill 6.
Right, and actually the coalition that has formed to try to push the repeal also has a website. I believe it's just repealhb6.com, and you can search for that on the internet too, and that has tons of information that you can use when you make that call. All right, well, thanks very much, Pat, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you in the future.
Thank you.
Rebecca, how are you doing?
Okay, a little stiff. The old meniscus is acting up this week again.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, luckily you don't need functioning knees to be a co-host on For a Green Future.
Thank heavens. So. Yeah, I'd be up the creek, I would.
So you wanted to talk a little bit about Slovenia.
Yeah, I did, and I'm sure the reason why is a deep dark mystery. It's just that this month is my friend Alfred's birthday. His parents are from Slovenia, and Slovenian is his first language. And also, he showed me some photographs of the vacation he took there, and it looked really, really intriguing.
Uh huh.
So,
is it largely wild? Is there a lot of wilderness in that country, or?
Well, it's hard to tell from photos, but it's traditionally always been sort of mostly an agricultural country, so, which is not as hard on the environment sometimes as farming, if you are doing it a certain way anyway. But so, yeah, it looks really gorgeous. I mean, one of the things that I did not know is that Slovenia is actually basically an alpine country. It's in the Balkans. Think like Switzerland or Austria, only without the crowds of annoying rich people and or music nerds running around, drooling over Mozart and trying to reenact the Sound of Music and stuff. Which is a terrible problem. Anyway, yeah, it's up in the Balkans, so it's got mountains, ski resorts, lakes. It's got Lake Bled, which is fed by hot springs and sounds really unique and cool, and the Ljubljanica River, which two major problems with researching Slovenia. A lot of the material you find is in fact in Slovenian, and the rest is kind of unpronounceable. But yeah, I looked up national parks, and I found something called the Center Triglavskaya Narodnaya Parka Bohinj, which
okay.
Yeah, that was my reaction. It's named after Mount Triglav, which is in it, the Triglavskaya bit, and I'm guessing center means center, park means park, and I don't know about Narodnaya. Bohinj probably means national, but I don't know. I saw pictures. Oh my God, it's gorgeous. Right up in the mountains. It's in something called the Soka Valley, and apparently they have astronomical evenings, hiking trails. There's some kind of a lodge or an interpretive center or something. That was one of the parts that was in Slovenian, so I don't know. The hiking trails are a little rugged, bring good footwear. It's serious. They're not playing up there. Rafting. Okay. They have rafting also. And RV camping. Get that. That's in the Soka Valley. I can't guarantee it's actually in the national park, but I had no idea anybody of Americans did RV camping. I don't know why I didn't think of that. But yeah, It's really, really pretty. The Soka Valley is based around the Soka River, which is has its source in the Julian Alps, comes out in the Adriatic, I believe. It's called the Emerald River because sometimes a year it goes all emeraldy because of minerals in the water, I guess. And you drive a few miles down the road to Nova Gorka, you can see something called the Solken Bridge, which is this really spectacular arch bridge, which it goes over the Soka River. So it looks like a really cool place. I think next week I'm probably going to have to do glaciers. Yeah, Slovenian glaciers. I'm guessing they have some.
Okay, it sounds like another place to add to the bucket list, Slovenia.
Definitely.
Right.
Oh, it looks so cool. I see why Alfred loves it so much.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got to move on with our eco news segment now. But there's still time for people to call in, 866-240-1065. If you have any thoughts about Slovenia or House Bill 6 or glaciers or just any sort of ecological thoughts at all that cross your mind, just pick up the phone and give us a call. There was a story in Ars Technica. There's been a study that says bird deaths are down 70% by the simple act of painting one of the three blades of a wind turbine, painting it black, and then the birds could see it better, and so that reduces bird strikes by 70%. Now it's not like birds are being constantly chopped up by wind turbines. That's Trump is lying when he says that. That is a lie. All the meta studies show the rate is about one bird per turbine per year, which is much less than Davis-Besse, for example, which kills about 3,000 birds a year. But
Trump is basically lying when his lips move, Joe.
But painting one of the three blades black can actually reduce that from one bird per year to 0.3 birds per year, less than a bird, like a bird every 2 or 3 years. It's funny how the clean energy sources, the wind and the sun, are being held to such an incredibly high ecological standard, compared to what we've already got, like winds and like coal and nuclear that are just killing birds left and right. And but somehow they try to hold wind up as a bird killer. It's not, but it can be improved even more, and that's a thing. If we start and if we study it and if we work on it, we might be able to get that 0.3 birds down to 0.01. With there might be other techniques we could use to reduce bird strikes even more. But using birds as an excuse to stop this transition to wind is absolutely wrong. And I know there's some groups that are trying to do that right now. They've been misled by the nuclear industry, but in the long run, we've got to make that switch. And this little trick, just painting one blade black, can make the switch even less harmful to the environment. So some nice news there. Some not so nice news from the Trump administration this past week. You probably heard about this one on other news sources, but Trump has opened up the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to oil and gas drilling. Literally the last pristine place in North America, in the United States of America, and he wants to get in there and build roads and put up oil wells and derricks. And the thing is that the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is only 10% of a larger area called the North Slope. And the North Slope has always been open to oil and gas exploration. And so we know that absolutely wrecks the environment. I mean, a lot of these oil places literally have lakes of oil next to them that have spilled out of the pumping, out of the oil wells as they pumped. And birds will come in and try to land on these oil lakes, and they sink because oil is less dense than water. And so things that can float in water, like birds and people, you put them in oil and they sink right to the bottom like stones. So it's just a horrible environmental impact. And so Trump wants to destroy the last wild place on the North American continent in the United States of America. And there's groups taking him to court again, for the, how many hundredth time, and hopefully they'll win, because what he is trying to do is contrary to law. It violates the wildlife refuge, the laws that govern it, but that's not stopping him. He's willing to break laws as often as possible, and he breaks as many as he can. He gets caught on a certain percentage, but then he feels he's ahead because he got away with whatever percentage is left over, 30 or 40%. That's pretty good for breaking laws without any consequence. So just another horrible thing Trump's trying to do. We know that eventually he's going to fail in all these horrible plans to try to destroy the last of the wild environment in the world. And how do we know this, Rebecca? What's the thing that tells us that eventually we're going to figure this all out and get our green future?
Is it the letter from the future? It
is. That's exactly what it is. Here is this week's letter from my great-great-granddaughter, Marida. Sorry this is such a short letter, but Ujwala, our chief chemist, and I have been putting in a lot of time studying that weird orange substance that came from the bottom of the borehole. We know the basic elements in it: iron, nickel, carbon, and silicon. And we know this because we were able to vaporize some of it with an incredibly powerful laser, and then analyze the gases that came off of it. But it took a ridiculous amount of energy to vaporize it, in fact more energy than any other substance in the scientific record. But that's all we know. We don't know the structure of it. Is it crystalline or non-crystalline? It seems to resist normal chemical analysis. It doesn't dissolve in acid. It's just weird. It's also a little weird around here on the Kola Peninsula. The birds have all left again. The frosts have started. I guess what's weird is that it's so normal. I mean, so much has happened to me in the last 2 years that it seems like it should be reflected in the world somehow. But I've decided to go to Igor's wedding, and I'm going to bring Michael. Love, Marie I. Yep, we've got a few minutes, as I said, time for a call. We've run through my carefully prepared material. But I did want to mention a little Facebook debate I got in this past week, and then I was posting about my wonderful super electric car, the plug-in Pacifica hybrid, and some guy came on and said, "I hope you are enjoying your coal-powered car, ha 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 ha," because of course a good chunk of the grid is coal-powered, and if you are charging off the grid, then some of that power is coming from coal-powered plants. But I wanted to say a couple things about that. One, that percentage has dropped dramatically in the last few years. Coal is down to less than a quarter of the American grid, of supplying power to the grid. And it used to be way up over 60, 70%. So that's one thing. It's much less coal power. And another, of course, is that we have solar panels on our house. And I got a little snarky with the guy, and I posted the graph of that day's solar panel output. And that day, my solar panels put about 35 kilowatt hours of power onto the grid. And that is about 3 times as much power as it takes to charge my van from empty to full. And so, I got, what I said was, I'm going to type slowly so that you can understand this. But my van is solar powered, and I explained it. And I couldn't help myself. These guys are trained, obnoxious people. They actually get instruction on how to poke people and get their goat and get them to respond, because trolls actually get paid, as I understand it, by the number of responses they can generate to their nastiness. And so, when you engage them, they're like, "Oh, great, keep going," and they'll put, post after post to try to poke you. Sometimes I can't let it go, though. I mean, intellectually I know that's true, but sometimes you just have to answer these guys because they're so obnoxious and so wrong. The basic idea, though, that your electric-powered car is coal-powered, I mean, there's that kernel of truth there, that there is coal in the grid, but where is the trend? The trend is for less and less coal and more wind and solar. And so we have to, if you have an electric car, you have a responsibility to help make that transition happen. You have to help keep pressure on. And when things come up like House Bill 6, if you want to have that wonderful smugness that comes from driving an electric car, but if you don't do anything to help repeal House Bill 6, then this guy's criticism can have some merit, because then you're willing to accept the polluting, the nasty nuclear and coal power that House Bill 6 promotes to power your electric car. But if you help us fight nuclear and you help us fight coal and you help us get the full repeal on House Bill 6, you can keep your smugness. It's a wonderful.
I think you can.
What? Go ahead.
I think you can still have a little smugness even if you're doing minimal things to try to move towards alternative power. Because even if you're not fighting for that, like at least you are part of this. You're putting in place like a setup and an infrastructure so that when that transition happens, the cars can still run. You're preparing for a better future, I think, whether you're really super active and fighting for that or not.
That's true.
Like nobody can say, "Oh my God, we can't drill for any more oil. All the cars will stop," because you're helping make that not true.
Yes, yep, that's true. You are. If you have switched to electric, you're putting in place the infrastructure that will help us make this transition to the green future. So, yes,
exactly.
and a lot of times that takes a little more of an investment. It definitely takes a little more work because you often have to convince the car dealer to sell you an electric or a hybrid car. But you're right. You can keep some of your smugness, but all it takes is 5 minutes to make a phone call. So I'm just saying people should do that too.
Totally.
All right. Well, I think we've reached the end of the show. Thanks very much, Rebecca, for joining us, and thank you all for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
To make this country run, but that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting